Hello. Okay, so my name's David Cross, and I'm here to talk about my friend Matthew Dons, who many of you will know as Cara Moon. This video is in response to Brian Lockwood's video that he put together a couple of weeks ago in response to the news he heard that Cara Moon is fighting cancer. And he put a video together saying how he had met Cara Moon and how he has come to know him subsequently. And he said in that video that it would be nice to hear from others around the world who are supporting Matthew in his fight against cancer at the moment. In response to that video, my friend Ed Paxton put a short video together himself, doing very much the same, explaining how he met Matthew and how he knows Matthew. And he suggested that it might be nice to hear from myself. So here I am. I'm in the UK. I'm approximately halfway between Cambridge and London. But I grew up in Norwich, and Matthew was one of my close school friends in Norwich. So, as I say, Matthew and I were at school together. We were in secondary school together at the Hewitt School in Norwich. And we really got to know each other in about 1994, so sometime later than Ed Paxton. But we formed a very strong friendship, which lasted us through the rest of our time at school together. So that took us through GCSEs and A-levels. We started our GCSEs in 1994 and our A-levels in 1996. And then in 1998 we went off to university. I don't exactly remember the first time I met Matthew, but I do have a strong memory of one of the first times I met Matthew, and this may well be the first time I met Matthew, which was we both have a mutual friend called Andrew Maggs, and I was quite good friends with Andrew Maggs already by that stage. My memory is of going to play 10-pin bowling with Andrew and his family at the Chrome Centre in Norwich, and Matthew had come along and joined us. I think possibly I've met Matthew once or twice before that, so I had some idea of who he was. But part of the reason this particular memory is so etched in my mind is because we were both rather amused at the time of Andrew Maggs's T-shirt, which had emblazoned on the front "Jesus Christ Superstar," and this was at a time, I think, when Andrew Maggs had quite long hair, so I think we found that rather amusing. Matthew and I were in a number of classes together for our GCSEs, and then we followed some similar courses at A-level. In particular, maths A-level. We were in the same classes for maths and physics, actually, I think. But yeah, Matthew and I, we would just hang out a lot together. We would just spend a lot of time together, sort of after school and at weekends. We would meet up. Matthew might come to my house. I would go to his house quite a lot. And Matthew was very keen on sort of sharing his interests. He was into all kinds of things, all kinds of esoteric things like lock picking, improving his memory, but also a lot of the cultural references I have these days. I link back to Matthew, regardless of whether actually Matthew introduced me to things. I think we had quite a few sort of similar interests. So, slightly unusual TV characters like Jonathan Meades. We used to sort of quite enjoy watching Jonathan Meades documentaries. I listened to PM with Eddie Mayer on Channel 4, and I always on Radio 4. And for some reason, I always every time it comes on, I have a slight linking back to Matthew Dons. He was always very keen on Eddie Mayer. And things like the Glenn Baxter cartoons, if ever I don't know if you're familiar, but I still have the Atlas book there, and Matthew was extremely fond of the Glenn Baxter cartoons, and it's quite fun to have a look back through the Atlas book every now and again. And Matthew was also still very keen on things that harked back to his days as a Sea Scout. In fact, I still have one of your books, Matthew, Knots and Splices, which must be from your Sea Scouts days. You lent that to me a long time ago, and I don't think I ever did learn any knots or splices, so sorry about that. One memory I have actually of time spent with Matthew, which also harked back to his Sea Scout days, were Matthew had this idea of taking a little night hike. So we used to walk a lot around Norwich, but he wanted to do a little night hike once, and so we arranged that I would come and stay at his place one night. And late at night we decided to put on some thick jumpers, and Matthew's house backed onto Earlham Road Cemetery, which is one of the biggest cemeteries in Norwich. And we put our thick jumpers on and we decided to climb over the back fence and hike around, or at least have a very long walk around Earlham Road Cemetery, which was kind of a bit spooky but rather a lot of fun at the time. But that is also another memory that's very strong in my mind, because the moon that night was extremely bright. It was almost like daylight, and I can still see the shadows on the ground cast by the gravestones and the trees in Earlham Road Cemetery. So yes, slightly unusual thing to do, I suppose, in some ways. So as I say, we used to meet up a lot in Norwich city centre, and we'd often arrange to meet in the Gerald's department store. In fact, we'd always arrange to meet in the magazine department. We sort of thought this was amusing to meet with our heads buried in magazines as though we were strangers, and then we'd head off on our merry way. And on one occasion, actually, while we were doing our A-levels, we would help each other a lot with our maths homework and the coursework that we had to get on with. And there was one time we met in Gerald's, and Matthew was maybe bringing some notes from class, or some notes that I had lent him, one or the other, about our maths. And I was going to take those back, but I didn't have any bag or anything with me, so I rolled them up and I tucked them in my sleeve. And then we left the store, and we were walking down the road. I think it was Gentleman's Walk, in the middle of Norwich. And then after about 5 minutes after sort of meeting Matthew, and several minutes after actually leaving the store, I got a tap on my shoulder. And it was a security guard from Gerald's, saying he'd had a report that I'd stuck something up my sleeve, that I'd slipped something up my sleeve. And so it was a happy moment on the street, unravelling this piece of complex partial differentiation that Matthew and I were working on, and trying to explain that to the security guard. And he then sort of went away with his tail between his legs. So that was a fun moment. Just lots of fun times, really. The last time I saw Matthew was about 6 years ago. It was in Norwich. Matthew was back visiting his parents, and he was over with his wife Chikako and his son Edward. His son was about 1 at the time, and I went across to Matthew's parents' place and saw Matthew and met his wife and his son, which was great at the time. I have children now, but at the time I didn't really know what to make of small babies. So in a funny sort of way, it was a bit strange for me. But Matthew was pretty thrilled with his son at the time, and that was nice. That was a nice memory. So yeah, Matthew is just a great school friend, and still is a good friend. We don't see, well, I haven't seen him for 6 years, of course, and we don't keep in touch as much as we used to, and that's a shame, really. But it's difficult since he's moved to Japan. But we kept in touch during university and after university, of course. And yeah, that's really how I know Matthew. And so I think many people who have met Matthew have had the good fortune to meet Matthew and form a friendship with him, will know that he's someone who knows his own mind. He likes to do his things his own way, and I think that's great. He's really forged his own path in life. So Matthew is fighting cancer at the moment. Before I wrap up, I'll just say that Matthew's fighting cancer, and he's very lucky to be in Japan and receiving treatment in Japan, because the healthcare system in Japan is very good. But it is worth saying that the cancer diagnosis is very bad, and so rightly he is seeking additional treatments to augment the chemotherapy that he's now undergoing, and one of these additional treatments is immunotherapy. But unfortunately, immunotherapy is not standardly available on the Japanese healthcare system, so he's having to seek that privately, and it's very, very expensive. But there have been some tremendous reports, success stories regarding immunotherapy. So there's great hope for Matthew and his family that it will benefit him in the long run. But as I say, it's expensive, and there is a funding page available if you haven't donated to Matthew's page before, and perhaps this inspires you in some way, or you know me and you're watching this because you know me but you don't know Matthew at all, then any donation is really a donation to his whole family, because it really does buy Matthew and his family more time, and particularly more time for his children to spend with his father. Children that he's extremely dedicated to. So good luck, Matthew, with the chemotherapy and the immunotherapy. I hope it's going okay. I hope the side effects this time around have not been so bad, and I hope they continue not to be so bad, although you have explained that they may well be pretty unpleasant. Yes, so I'll put the link on to Matthew's funding page when I post this video onto Facebook, and you can go and have a look if you want to donate to that. Last time I had a look, the fund was at £27,000. Every cycle of immunotherapy costs about £15,000. Matthew has started the immunotherapy, and that's really, really good news. But every new cycle is going to cost around £15,000. So great that he'll be able to have another cycle, but more funds are needed to enable him to have as many cycles as possible in order to try and keep him going. Okay, I'll thank you for listening and say goodbye.